Welcome, everybody, to the September 4th. This is our second to the last C-CDA Implementation-a-thon track prep session. So hopefully everybody is back from Labor Day and feeling the shift to fall and getting organized and out of summer mode and into going to Connect-a-thon mode. Today I am going to run through an agenda that includes the topics. I'm going to reverse the order. I'm going to cover the topics that we are going to talk about on Sunday Q1 with respect to provenance and go through that material first. I have a feeling that Brett Marquardt might be joining us today, and if he can be here at the beginning of the call, I just wanted him to benefit from being able to hear our questions and some of the things that we are puzzling over as we prepare to have that quarter discussion. And then after we get through that, I'll go through some of these recaps and a couple of updates that I have on the basic logistics for the sample documents and a couple of things to follow up on. And then we will get into these sort of niggly logistics issues that we're having with access to Dropbox and Google Drive, and we'll work on those problems. Today is the main focus of it is just getting organized around data provenance, and I have a couple of slides that I wanted to show at the tail end of my deck here, so let me bring you down to this slide. There is a new template that was released with the C-CDA Release 2.1 Companion Guide, R2, that was in ballot in July. And I would like to make sure that everybody knows how to find that work in this new template so that you have the benefit of understanding that as a part of what we would talk about in Q1 on Sunday. The template is called Provenance Author Participation, and it is similar to the template that you know from Consolidated CDA called Author Participation. And so I'm going to talk to you about how to just get a hold of that and how, where we can see that it's really different. And then I have a couple of questions that are food for thought to think about, not just the technical guidance of how do I record the author, which this template clearly gives us, but the deeper question of who is the author. And there really isn't a lot of guidance right now about the business rules and sort of determining who is the author. There's some general definition that we can look at together, both in CDA and in this provenance, basic provenance IG. We'll take a look at that just to be food for thought. And then I'd like to challenge us to think a little bit about the relationship between authors and performers. You know, there's multiple kinds of participations in CDA, and there's a distinct notion of what it means to be the performer of a certain act. And I'm just trying to instigate some conversation about the difference between being the author of an act and the performer of an act. So we'll talk a little bit about that. Let's cover where to get the information first. So obviously you can go to the HL7 ballot desktop and look at the September ballot and pull the early ballot materials are up at the top of that list. You can do it the traditional way that way. But I also wanted to take this opportunity to show you in Dropbox where I loaded all these things to make life easy for you. So first of all, in Zulip, which I'm encouraging everybody to get access to, in Zulip, I put a link to get to the resources area in Dropbox. And one of the things that will happen if you guys do go and check this out is it will help me understand if we're having any access problems, like when we just fleshed out the problem with the attendance sheet this morning. If people don't try and get access to it, then we don't know when there's problems or not. So you can get the links out on Zulip, and then I will show you that when you're in the Dropbox that we created for the IAT, there are several folders that are helpful, but this resources folder is chock full of helpful things. This is where you find the patient story. It's got the overall RMIM map of CDA. It's got information about US CDI, et cetera, et cetera. Right on the bottom here, I put a folder called Basic Provenance, and that has got the implementation guide that's balloting right now in the September ballot that has good background information that we'll be referencing. And then up here in the C-CDA companion guide folder, we have both the R1 version and the R2 version. So if you want to get a hold of the definition for this basic provenance template, if you look at that R2IG in Appendix C, that is where you will find the template definitions for where I got to get on the right file here, over in my PDF viewer. There we go. So Appendix C has just this one template in it, provenance, author participation. And if you scan down into this document, you will run into the template definition right here, as well as the conformance statements. And these conformance statements, I think, are important to familiarize yourself with, because the real question is, what's different about this new provenance author template from the guidance that we previously had in consolidated CDA? That's that one. New author participant. I'm sorry, I thought I had this stuff all opened up for myself before I got started here. Provenance author. Now I have one document open twice. Give me 1 second. Narada. Did it open? Author participation. Yep. Okay. So here, to orient myself, the second tab is consolidated CDA, the June errata, and this tab over here. Nope. This tab, sorry, right here, is the Appendix C, which is the provenance. So I'm going to hop down here to the current author participation and just give you a couple of examples of how you can easily compare what's the same and different about these two templates. So in the existing author template, the guidance is looser around having an assigned author. There shall be an assigned author, and that author has to have at least one ID. But the constraints around what is included and referenced in the ID information, a little bit about the assigned author code coming from the healthcare provider taxonomy, and then some of the guidance around persons, devices, and organizations is different, with the new insight around needing to have more specific information included for the, I don't feel like I'm in the right spot still. Let me get the Appendix C open. Here we go. Sorry about that. A little bit more specific about the ID and the roles that need to be represented. So now that I have this open correctly. So here you can see that there is more specific guidance around the IDs. This fact that you shall have at least one ID is really the same in both places. But the additional information is about an NPI number. So there's guidance about what do you do if you have an NPI number and if you don't have an NPI number. The guidance is also a little bit stricter around having an assigned person and an assigned author represented organization. So the details, it's not that this is a different author or a different kind of author, or it's meant to represent the who of who is the author any differently at all. I have heard the expression like, this is the provenance author versus like just the regular author. And that's not the point of this template. The author is the author is the author. But this is providing guidance about what information you should be including with the author that comes from a little bit deeper thinking around what needs to be addressed so that you do have more complete provenance information for that author. I think I'll take questions at this point about how these two templates from consolidated CDA to the new, more specific guidance in the provenance author template. Are there questions that anyone would like to ask right now?
This is Rachel. Thank you for covering this. It's super important to us. And I'm curious about NPI, and maybe we can figure this out at the implementation of Thon, is how many people are going to be putting NPI in their C-CDAs. Most CCDAs we've been seeing, they have internal identifiers in the CCDA and not necessarily MPI, whereas quality data tends to have the MPI to represent the provider. Mm-hmm. So I think this will be really good to see and understand what the industry is going to do to approach that.
Excellent. I will put that down as a specific question to kind of do a poll about, and we can get an informal indication of that. But I definitely, have nailed that Q2 on Saturday. We are going to talk about all things quality, and you'll see that at the end of the agenda today. That we're definitely, there's so much interest with members of NCQA coming to the Connect-a-thon. Several of our participants have already stepped up to say they've got some cool stuff to show, and there's a lot of interest to talk more about the use of C-CDA documents for the purpose of gathering information that can be used in quality measures. And so without a doubt, the need to represent that MPI number information is part of what makes these documents the kind of quality that they need to be fit for that purpose. So it will be really interesting to see, especially in the context of talking about that quality use case the day before. If on Sunday we find that more people are kind of thinking about or committed to making that change if they don't do it already. Okay, anybody else? This question about who is the author versus how do I record the author is, how is everybody feeling about understanding and do we have clarity around what it means to be the author, and that you feel confident about knowing who's the right person to be representing as the author? I'll seed the question just with a little bit more information. I'm in the basic provenance implementation guide right now, and there's a chapter that covers context. And in this, you will see some definitional kind of notions, and one of them is about the author being the person who is responsible for the information. And I myself put a comment in on the ballot about what does this mean to be the person who is responsible for the information. You know, just kind of questioning the notion of, does that mean the same thing as the person who is asserting that this information is true? And I don't know if anybody else is thinking about that, but I did want to share the base standard information. If I still have that open, let me think for just a sec. If I
Lisa, this is Brett.
that.
So,
Yeah, go ahead, Brett.
Yeah, so you know, one of the things that's on my mind for Provenance, I know you're starting to kind of delve into the author versus participation, but if you go back to that PDF, I think one of the questions that came in to me, so we have these use cases, and we spent a lot of time. If you scroll down, you'll see there's 4 use cases in this guide, and I think these use cases are incredibly relevant to CDA, and some of them actually came primarily from our CDA discussions. One of the things I had a question on in here was the use case of a lab system passing to an EHR, and then an EHR generating a CDA document, and whether in that CDA document, CCD whatever, CCD document, that really communicating the author with the lab was helpful, or if the author organization of the EHR was more useful to downstream systems. And you and I can debate a bit about what's, you know, exactly appropriate, but that's one question I was hoping to discuss a little bit during the implementation-a-thon is, you know, when we have these use cases with HIEs in the middle, kind of 2 and 3 there, how are folks expecting authorship to pass around? I kind of in my mind how some of it works, but a lot of the feedback I got from folks is author organization is by far the most important thing, and you know, that's who you're going to call. Provider, they're okay, but really it's the organization that sent it is the key thing. And so I was hoping to discuss a little bit on this when we do redistribution. You know, who is that author organization?
Okay, so these 2 use cases, number 2 and number 3, are important to dig into for that background that Brett has there. With that question, Brett, how does that affect the design of? Oh, let me see if I'm doing such a bad job with my navigation here. So this is the old one. This is the new one. How does that affect the design of the shall on the person? Are we rethinking about that as maybe you don't have to have a person, but you definitely shall have an organization, or are you just collecting this information as a poll to figure out where implementers are with the guidance and with the use case for it?
Yeah, great question. I guess I'm thinking of it as 2 parts. The first part is, rethinking whether the assigned person is a mandatory, you know, shall element here. So that's the first one. And then the other is in the actual design of the basic provenance, we omitted intentionally, we kind of try to make these scenarios generic. I mean, generic, maybe that's loose, a little too loose. Basically, we wanted to make it, you know, so that someone who had a slightly different standard could read this and it would make sense to them and they could think about how it applies to their standards. So these use cases fit to both FHIR and CDA. And I think, Lisa, what we found is, we think it'd be beneficial within each of these to say, hey, for the fact scenario, you know, it's between 2 sites, this is what it means for author provenance. Here's what's expected. And so we're having a little bit of debate about, you know, adding sections underneath each of these. And so, you know, if we have a little time in that Sunday session, as part of reviewing these use cases, I'd love to say, you know, once we get the pulse of what folks were thinking on the pass through, you know, making sure the guidance goes with that. If you know, yeah, that makes sense.
I have something to add to that. That whole fax scenario, I know it's person to person, but and fax to people, to me, means you're passing paper back and forth, electronic paper back and forth. But direct messaging also has the same problems. We're finding that just because the sender of the C-CDA is one doctor doesn't mean it's the doctor author in the C-CDA. So I hope we can address some of that too. And then there's the metadata, and it's getting complicated because doctors have access to other patients' data in the EHR system. It might not be their patient, but because of a referral and it's all in the same EHR system, so they send the same C-CDA out via direct. and the author on it is not the doctor that had possession of the C-CDA that's actually sending it.
Yeah, I mean, that's a whole interesting, and we put facts in quotes to the idea to cover the direct use case, so you know, it is the idea, but yeah, I mean, that's a great example, Rachel, of, you know, if you're, and I think some of this might be, we may have to document a little about like what's, you know, what's the principle and what's the practice today, so folks, you know, are aware of what's out there and, you know, where we'd like folks to go.
That's I'm going to write that one down, Brett, because I think I like that. The what's the practice today, and then what's the principles at hand. One question I was wondering about around principles is the notion that when information comes into an EHR from anywhere else, there's this notion of making it viewable to people who are using this new system. And then there's the notion of reconciliation, or the process of pulling information out of whatever sources you might be looking at and bringing it into your medical record, your new medical legal source of information on the patient. And is there a, like, do you feel like the industry has come to an agreement that the point of doing that makes the authorship now, whoever has brought this into their system, it's because they're saying this is useful, relevant, pertinent, I'm going to bring this fact into my EHR? Does that necessarily make that person now the author of that fact in their EHR? Have we like all gelled on that, or is that still a principle that's not common?
I mean, I think Lisa, what's hard is when you say bring that thing in, I mean, if it's the full document, I mean, if we review the Siri use case in detail, we made a pretty firm statement in there that if you accept a problem or accept an allergy into your EHR as part of reconciliation, you are taking authorship of that in your system because you're the one that did it. In terms of accepting the whole kind of boatload of a document, with all of its details, I'm not, I think of them being kind of stored as outside.
Yeah, not that. That is the line that I'm trying. That is the line that I'm trying to draw. The difference between having a document that is accessible and viewable as a resource that came in from somewhere else, and now you can look at it through your EHR. I'm drawing the line between there and the step that has to do with importing data into your own EHR, not as like a whole document that's just there for viewing reference, but as something that is now in your system. So
Lisa, I kind of brought this up a while ago and kind of talked to Matt. Matt's on the call, right, from ONC? Certification requires that you reconcile data, and it's a whole process. It's B2 of ONC certification. And there's a line in there that, although ONC may not have meant for it to be, it's being required to be implemented by the ATCBs that do the testing, that the source of the data be carried through to the EHR system, even after merge. So if you merge medication into your EHR system, you may have like a Buterol, and then the patient's C-CDA that's coming in has penicillin on it. You're supposed to merge that data and then recreate a new C-CDA. But the source of the data needs to be carried with the data. How long? I don't know. When does the authorship of it change the source of it? And it's really hard for us to consult on that part. Who is the source? Is it the direct message that it came from? Is it the author on the C-CDA? Is there an author on that individual data element? More definition around what that means. Even the custodian of the C-CDA has come into play here. So understanding what is meant to be done versus what is being done is a big question in because we don't ever see the reconciliation side. You don't ever see that document but they are testing this, and they're making sure that you're carrying the source through, and everybody's doing it different.
Yeah, Rochelle, do you have the when they've done that, or the particular site you're working with, ATL working with, which use case, can you tell?
Isn't it 3.17?
3.17, I can send that to you, but it's the B1 of 2015 edition certification.
No, but I guess I'm looking for the reference.
I mean, B2, sorry.
The reference where they've said you have, you know, if you, I'm looking for the piece where it says you've accepted this in your system. When you resend it, you have to carry forward the person that you accepted it from. I wasn't aware of that.
It's in Drummond's test scripts, and I can't share those. But if you have Drummond test scripts, I can tell you where.
Can you point to where it says it in the rule?
I think I sent you an email. I'll go find the email again. But I think you determined the word source wasn't exactly what was being, it wasn't what was intended, but they are definitely, you know, testing that process.
Yeah, I think I put some information out there to help people find their way to this. And let me see if I can just remember.
If you go to the certification,
I think it's under reconciliation.
And I guess, Rochelle, I mean, I know there's only a week left, but the basic provenance guide, I guess, is, I think you're right in recognizing that, you know, we don't have clear principles on this, and you know, even basic provenance, I think, is fairly light, but it's a step towards that of trying to define what the principles are.
Definitely.
So fairly short, and you know, if you only have 10 minutes, check out the use cases. If you have more, the whole guide it'll be worth your time.
Okay. Okay. No, we're going through the whole guide this week, so that's good. We just didn't have access. We couldn't find it, so thank you for providing it. But
2 and 3.
I can send you information on what I found related to it. It's reconciliation is B3.
Can you hear me, Lisa? This
We
is
can
Emma.
hear you now, Emma.
Okay, I put it in chat what Rochelle is talking about, the test procedure
Thank you.
that shows.
And just to be clear, it's B2, not V2.
Yeah, it's B2.
B as in boy.
And if you scroll down to paragraph 3A, yeah, right there, scroll up a little bit more. Okay. The user simultaneously view the data, number 2, along with the source and last modification date attributes.
There you go. Is that Emma?
Yeah, it's Emma.
Yeah, that's Emma.
Thanks, Emma. Awesome.
Thanks for that link, too. Appreciate that.
I guess I read that, Emma, as displaying what's in your current EHR with other sources. Is that the wrong way to read that?
Well, I guess, Brett, it depends on like that background assumption of what does it mean to be the source, and that aspect of that when you bring information into your system, are you now the source of that information? And by bringing in, I mean actually through this reconciliation process, load discrete data into your own medical records.
So those next 2 bullets makes reference, I believe, to the information that you brought in.
Right. That's what I understood. That second part, especially the second bullet.
I don't really see anything in the second bullet that is declaring sort of the notion of what does anybody consider to be the source.
Well, the definition of source is not there, but the fact that they mention the transition of care, it's being read as if, some people are reading it as if you want the source from the transition of care document that's coming in. Now that's up for interpretation, I'm sure, but I can look at the test steps too, and maybe provide a snippet of, you know, what they're requiring to be tested in that step.
All right, super. Well, I'm going to add this link right here, and getting at what the certification criteria is as it's being applied definitely is important, because that does drive so much of our behavior. And then we need to compare that against what the community believes are the right principles that should be at hand, and how that thinking maybe should affect some of our practices. Brett, thanks so much for being here. Is there anything else that you think we should focus on in getting ready for this session?
No, I think, looking forward to the discussion in a little over a week. Excellent.
Well, thank you very much. Okay, this is really good for getting us ready here. And if you think of anything after the call, feel free to email me directly. We will be putting together a facilitation plan so that we ask some good questions and tee up the right challenges. But if there's things that you definitely want to bring forward, it's a long quarter. Q1 is a good amount of time, but there'll be a lot of people. We're hoping to draw from the fire community as well, and get a lot out on the table here for people to debate about. Oh, I wanted to note that question about what Brett said about, is the person critical to be recorded? Because right now that's a shall in the template that's proposed. Or is the organization more important? And what are the use cases for this provenance information? I think quality measures has some impact on that as well. It'll be interesting to see what the assumptions are, because simply knowing the organization may not be sufficient for some of the quality measure use cases. Okay. Anything else on provenance? Yep.
I don't think it. Go ahead. Someone else has a question.
Oh, this is Abigail. I was just going to say, we're fielding questions on this about patient self-monitoring of blood pressure medications and so forth, and so that's more a use case for. But kind of one of the questions is, can an app be put in there? So, yeah.
And that would be the authoring device, but that is...
Well, yeah, it's like your authoring device, your blood cuff or your phone, versus is the application like a proxy for the person doing the recording? And, there are questions around there.
Yep. Good questions. I got that down.
So Lisa, are we still going to talk about author versus performer?
Yes, Emma, I didn't bring that forward, but that is a big thing on my mind about the relationship between author and performer. So I'll just, so it doesn't get lost, I will make sure that that comes down here.
Sorry, that was the part I was excited about.
I knew you would be. Relationship between author and performer. Okay, super. All right, that's going to be fun. That's going to be a really good quarter. Okay, let's go back and see if there were, I think there were just like a couple of other housekeeping things I wanted to talk about. The plan for sample document generation, I feel really excited about the fact that we've got some of the same folks who are participating in Clinicians on Fire group helping with the scenario that is going to be driving our sample document creation at the Connect-a-thon. So I did get a little update from Dr. Chu, and out in the patient story area on this resources drive, you will notice that there's a new final copy. After last week, we were up to August 28th there, but on September 1st, I updated one. It's very small. changes, you know, like a medication revision that he made and a couple little tiny things like that. A little bit more information in some of the areas of recording wound information and observations about healing and some things like that that we got from working with some folks that are looking at wound assessment. So it is a little smidge better than the one that we had before. But I put the PDF out there so that it has the description of the examples that we're going to work on Saturday around encounter documents, and then the stuff that we're going to practice on Sunday. It has all of that baked into the document. But I also left the Word version out there in case anybody feels inspired that they want to take this story and run with it a little bit. There are spots in Ted Levin's life where he's getting an eye exam and he's going to the dentist, and some of the other areas where we have active CDA community work around dental visit summaries and eye exams and other kinds of care that we get outside of the scope of what we typically see. We set this scenario up so that if folks who are on the peripheral edges of some of the other kinds of work, the wound assessment work, for example, there's an opportunity to plug in additional detail and make this richer and make this storyboard something that we can use not only for testing within the CDA Connectathon, but also you can use it for your Fire Connectathon stuff. And we can go back and forth. The document is not specific to CDA. It exercises a good set of issues to cause us to be challenged on what we can share using different formats, CDA or Fire, and it has a real longitudinal challenge to it because we see the patient's meds changing. We see the patient's address changing. We see the patient's condition changing over time. And that's going to give us some of the, some of the fodder that we need to practice not only provenance, but also versioning and just longitudinal record stuff in general. So highly recommend you get a copy of that, check it out, and also plan on preparing some of your documents ahead of time. I'll throw the schedule back up to let you know that while we have gotten really excited about doing a little bit more in Q2 on Saturday, specifically focused around quality measurement, because so many people want to talk about that, it means that Q2 is not really going to be a time where you can go off and work on generating your documents. And so if you leave these encounter document samples to lunchtime on Saturday, we're not going to get as good a set of samples as if you break into that patient story and do a little bit of work up front, give yourself a break so that on Saturday you can focus on the things we're talking about, you can get some lunch, and when we come back in Q3 to review and look at the documents, you won't just be heads down trying to create your samples. How's that for encouragement? Something else I wanted to mention, besides the sample document generation and playing with that as a storyboard, I did a little bit of background review, practicing with some of the specialized style tags that have been developed in the multiple content views profile from IHE. The MCV profile is posted in the resources area, and it's intended to bring up some interesting dialogue around rendering of information when it's consumed into a new system and some of the capabilities that may be possible for providing multiple views of the information. Up until now, excuse me, most people just rely on the fact that the section.txt can easily be rendered in exactly the format that the content creator intended it to be rendered. But some of the style tag information that's available could have different effects depending on what the consuming system decides to do to process the information that is tagged in that way. And so this profile, in order to get a little bit of that behavior, if you want to practice with it, besides the fact that you want to get into this profile, and on our slides where we covered this before, I give you right down to the page number of where do you go to see some of the available labels. But in order to explore or experiment with what does it look like, I had Alexander Henkett produce a specialized style sheet. This is very similar to the style sheet that is released with consolidated CDA. Actually, sorry, it's released with the base standard CDA. But there is a version 4.01. It's a little bit older version. We're up to like 4.09 right now. But this earlier version, he had implemented some capabilities which will do different things if you use some of the style tags that are defined in MCV. So if you want to explore that, I just wanted to note that you won't see any effect if you're just using the existing currently released on HL7 style sheet. You need to get a copy of this customized one and play with that a little bit to explore what that looks like. And then, of course, you can invent and program all kinds of other things from there. But Alex gave a cool question to seed this conversation, because it does use it has some style tags that affect the name, the patient's name, and formatting around dates and some other stuff like that too. And his question was really about what assumptions are implementers making about the processing of the information that's in the CDA document and how the rendering will be done. Are there any implementers that are moving beyond this notion of just revealing what's in section.txt to do more sophisticated rendering options? And like Brett, I'd like to pose that question, or I guess it was Rochelle who said that she'd like to poll people to find out how serious they are about including NPI. I think we should poll people to find out how serious anybody is or what's in practice around other kinds of rendering, because the guidance in the companion guide encourages people to look at doing this, but I think that we might want to temper some of those remarks in the companion guide that's under ballot right now if no implementers are really looking about going down that path. Thoughts on that? Emma, do you have anything that you want to share around multiple content views one way or the other to get people thinking about that?
I know we use some of those. Well, I know for sure in our style sheet, now we have our script style sheet. We use XHide. Dan, what else do we use? Because one of our requirements was we render the same, well, we render documents for different Allscripts products, and some of them in their problem list, for example, they only output active problems, but they didn't want all the problems listed with the word active, 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 active like that. So users thought that was just redundant, and they just in their style sheet wanted to hide the word active. Now we include active in the XML, and you can import it and you'll know it's active. If you put it in the HL7 style, if you use the HL7 style sheet, you'll see that it's active. But so we use XHide to hide the word active. In some parts of the document, some people wanted us to render out the ICD-9 code, but if sending a document to a patient, like a patient level document or for patient viewing, they didn't want to expose ICD-9 codes to patients because those were things that patients did, and this is requirements from users, that patients typically doesn't need to see or care to see in some situations. So we use XHide around the ICD-9 codes for patient-generated documents as well.
And does it require a multi-step rendering process, or are you able to still accomplish that with the basic style sheet?
Well, no, what we do is from our implementation, we follow the IHE paradigm where the way the document is the way we expect the receiver to view the document. So we package our document with our style sheet embedded.
Cool. Okay. So we have a time in one of the quarters where we're talking about rendering issues and things like that. So we'll definitely touch on that at that time. But I wanted to make sure that people knew about that new style sheet that I posted out there. And then there has been some discussion on the listserv around how date information is recorded in, date time information is recorded in CDA documents and how it's rendered. Consistency around rendering, and also some challenges around if the server is in one time zone and the encounter is happening in a different time zone, how do you render the information correctly when it might actually be recorded in the CDA document in some other time zone? So I think that's another one of those places where we're hoping that many implementers will come prepared to discuss what their strategy has been on this issue, and maybe we can come up with some common practices that we can share so that more people are doing that all the same way. The Saturday Q2 session, as I said, I was early on. We knew that there was quite a lot of interest in using C-CDA documents for quality measures. Now that I know there's at least 3 different implementers that have talked to me about some of the things that they have going on that they would like to share and discuss. And then we've got participation from NCQA that makes some comments around where things are and where things might be heading and how they view the use of information in CDA documents for quality measurement. So I think that Q2 will end up being focused on this topic, and you will have less time to do sample creation during Q2. So it won't, you just have that time pressure to deal with, and that's why I'm trying to encourage everybody to get a hold of making your documents for Saturday a little bit in advance. What questions do you have before we try to deal with our file access and logistics? Anything else? Everybody feeling excited about getting to Atlanta and having another live Connect-a-thon together? 19 people today. I think there's pretty good attendance. I definitely see a shift that we're out of August summer mode, so I'm glad to see all the participants today. I will mention that if you did miss our earlier sessions, this PowerPoint is posted and it's been accumulating over the 5 sessions that we had before this. It's a good little resource. It's posted on the Confluence site along with the recordings that were done from the prep sessions in the past, and you can go back and watch those, or email me if you have any questions. And with that, I will shift to the hardest part of Connect-a-thon, which is accessing to the Dropbox and the Google Drives. And I wanted to just note that I did set up folders, which I've been hearing from some folks that they have had good success getting access to their company's folder. So as folks have been RSVPing that they plan on participating and will be creating documents, I've made a folder for your company and I've shared it out. So if anybody's still stuck on this part, email me after lnelson@max.md. I'll put that in the chat, lnelson@max.md. Email me and we'll work on making sure that you have access to your Dropbox folder so you can stick your samples out there. I have talked with Dave and Matt a little bit about the expectations once we start to share things, and I'm interested just to confirm that everybody's okay. Once we get to Connect-a-thon and you've had the opportunity to get some feedback on your documents and work through the exercises, we would like to open these folders up to be able to be resources so that if folks do want to take a look, and obviously in order to consume each other's documents, I'm going to have to open the sharing up to the rest of the folks so that people can get access, look at your documents, try to import them or render them, etc. So I just wanted to make sure that everybody understands that I set these privileges up for now, but that when we get to Connect-a-thon, we will need to be able to access each other's files. Does that seem like a fair assumption? Good. Rochelle, you were vocal about this before. Is that matching with what you guys are okay with?
This is Ozam. She might be off the call. I think
Okay.
so. Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right. Great. Thanks, Oslam. And the Google Doc was the other area that we have set up. Right now, the only thing I really have going on in the Google area is the attendance sheet. We do have that one little resource, which I can also load over in the resources section, that is all the documents with sections, a quick way of taking a look at consolidated CDA and the different kinds of encounter summaries and how they are similar to CCDs and where they differ. That little tool is out there, but I can load that in the resources area too. I don't think there's anything else that you really have to get access to, and if you can't get access to the Google document, we can handle the attendance check-in in another way or for you when we get to Connect-a-thon, so it should be okay. I think
Lisa,
that yeah.
I've added the current room numbers to the Confluence page for Atlanta. However, I know Mary Ann will probably have to move us, not reducing the space, but just move us because our Fire Connect-a-thon registrations are pretty much a record. We're at like 350 or so.
Okay.
So
okay.
I'll keep that
updated. You still have us in a sort of a larger room on Sunday morning. That's the time when we feel like there's going to be the biggest group. Yep.
Yep.
Okay, great. Okay, so stay posted on Confluence for the actual room locations. If you have any other basic logistics questions, you can always email Dave Hamill. Maybe, Dave, you could stick your email in the chat as well. And I think that's everything I wanted to talk about today. Next week, let's just go over this. Next week, we have a prep session to have Matt Ron talk with us about what kinds of questions you guys would like to talk about with respect to the C-CDA rubric. There's a project out there that's being reconciled right now around guidance rules that are community best practice that are candidates to be included in the ONC scorecard tool. And probably he'll have some updates about that and see what kinds of questions and what people want to talk about and that. And also the US CDI process, this new vision of being able to clarify additional data elements and bring more and more of these clearly defined data elements into being over time and be on a regular course for implementers to be supporting this growing base of well-defined data elements. He'll be talking about how they see that coming together, kind of where we are today and where you can expect to see that process move in the future. So that'll be next Wednesday. I would say it'd be really awesome if everybody could at least download that patient scenario and have a read of it, see what kinds of questions that you have, because between now and next week, if you sent me questions, I'd be able to help and I'd be able to deal with things a lot better between now and then than if we don't get the questions until the day of Connect-a-thon. So this would be a really good time to take a look at the scenario and start to try and generate some documents. Thank you very much, everyone. Unless there's any other questions, going once, going twice, we'll call that a wrap. See you next week.